right, about ready to tackle the specific rules, but I just have to say, when a game doesn't meet kind of the expectations that you have for it, so the rest of the series, even Sicily, with its additional layer of chrome, is largely approachable, in part because of the SPI paragraph system as opposed to, you know, I didn't find the basic rules all that difficult, but these I'm left sort of hoping that I get it walking, you know, going through them with you. Fuck. Okay, great. Talking about there, same as I had before, the stiffness of the paper of these booklets, very high quality paper. Means they don't just flip open the way the cheap thin paper booklets do. One thing I noticed is my staples in this. I don't know, you know, quality of staples has changed or whatever, or if I'm just not used to them. But the staples in the MMP rulebooks, well, in this particular game, have rusted. Now, I have not had this game very long, a few years, but, you know, I find that odd. I don't think my GMT rulebooks have rusted yet. I have to look to see. Okay. So we got a bunch of different counters, some of which I don't know, like this VLZ marker, presumably for landing zone. I don't remember seeing any rules about it. But all right, and I gotta fold the book again. I was saying about the expectations, it's that if something doesn't meet expectations and then you get all excited about it, you come to it and it's not meeting those expectations and you're like, oh geez, man, I don't know if I'm up for this, you know, or whatever. And in this case, I had pretty solid expectations based on the rest of the series, or the original games that this is derived from. So we got some setup here. The instructions here are not sufficient to set up the game. It's not like, hey, look on the counters and find the locations for it. The locations are handled later in the book, as is the case with, say, you know, some of the gamers' designs. I found, however, there to be errata within the setup, and also it wasn't explained how the setup was performed, you know, what their means of expressing things are. So like this, you know, map A10A, Ang, roads A through D would indicate that this unit, what unit, I don't know what it is. It turns out it'll enter on game turn 8, okay, because turn 8 is listed up here, but here I'm looking at 10 and I'm thinking 10. September 12 p.m. Okay, now I understand the dating. On the north edge of the map, which is, I guess, the roads A through D. And, well, I don't see the north edge of the map part here. Oh, map A, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, the example is not at all clear what they're trying to express from it. And then when you go look at it, if you don't take that example into play, into mind, it becomes perhaps even more cryptic. Okay, so all these markers are put on tracks. Again, no real specification of where on the tracks, what levels. You kind of expect that kind of thing, but I'm just nitpicking because I just don't fucking want to get to the rolls. That's what it comes down to. Sequence of play. Is it any different? It must be. It's got the, yeah, it is. Okay. I think it's pretty standard running through, I don't know about variable reinforcements, but running through to here. And then we have this post-invasion build-up segment, which is new. And then repeat for the axis. And then a special stage, like in Sicily, where you replay the movement rounds for the first turn. And on the first turn, it's subject to special rules, no bookkeeping, supply reserve, or engineering phases. Movement allowances are halved, rounding down. Allied units cannot use strategic movement. And then you get a second movement in combat after that. And these are actually have sequence markers on on the turn track as 1A and 1B. I don't know how much you need that, but okay. It will help, I guess. If there's a storm on the first turn, you roll the weather again. Okay. Amphibious landing. These happen on the first game turn, unless 32 variable campaign game. Okay, so I did not see this. Looks like it exists. Okay. So I still don't see it. Yeah. I don't see this rule. I mean, I'm serious. Here we're on 30, 31. 32 is additional scenarios. And there is no variable campaign game. Very interesting. I'm not sure that there's a campaign game either. Okay? These are scenarios other than the campaign, which is not... what do we got here? Historical campaign. Maybe that's some of these? I don't know. I don't know if these are, other than the invasion tutorial, are supposed to be variable campaign games. But it's none of them are a variable campaign game the way Sicily is, where you get to pick what you're going to do and what your goals are. They may just be variant campaign games. That's absolutely not clear here, and I was left wondering what the fuck happened to that. Maybe some of those scenarios call into play some of the pieces that I cannot figure out where they come, where they apply to the game. Maybe I missed them. Often my way of figuring out, do I have everything that I need for the game? Do I understand what I'm doing with the game? Is to set up the full campaign with all the reinforcements and everything and make sure I've got all my counters. Well, I've got extra counters, and maybe they're in the setup, maybe they're meant to be there and are not, and maybe they're for some variable campaign game that doesn't exist, or one of the other scenarios in there. None of that's really expressed to me by the rule book, and that's fucking disturbing. Okay. During the amphibious landing segment, the allied player places units to be landed on coastal hexes directly in front of the deployment hex. Well, I guess we do kind of like that or something. I don't know. Hex, he rolls a die for each landing unit to see if it's disrupted. Basically, disrupted means they're not going to be able to move anymore. I'm sure there's a chart for it. It was not terribly likely in Sicily. You need a 7 or more if you fail the die roll. And you get penalties. In this case, you give additional penalty if there's already disrupted units. They give counters for disrupted units in this game, which, okay, fine. They give a lot of counters for disrupted units. Now on the back they have broken bridges, so they're not completely useless when you're not landing on that first turn. It looks like there's more counters than I'm going to need, especially since not all units will be disrupted. I found tilting the counters fine in Sicily, maybe a little bit of a waste. Yeah, I'm going to find everything I can to criticize this, just because that's the mood I'm in. When something turns negative, I get more negative. It just snowballs. Undisrupted units may move 1 hex beyond the landing beach hex unless prohibited by terrain. All units on the first wave must be landed on invasion turn 1A, and then they can move normally in their second half of the special stage. I think this is different from Sicily. I think you had a movement on that first wave. If you don't, I fucked up the rolls. Then the second wave is landed in stage B, and they work the same as the first wave units, and then they'll get to move, they only can move 1 hex inland. Units in the second wave, supply depots must be landed in a beach on the designated beach. Okay, well, there are not designated beaches. So like this is in this line. Does that mean it must land there, or am I allowed to do what I want with the beaches? Again, not explained. Whatever. Like, there was a different graphic in Sicily that allowed you to tell I can land between a range of spaces. Here, it looks like each column is attached to a single arrow. And again, disturbing. Maybe there's some place where it tells you something, but I doubt it. All I see is map scale. I don't see anything about special rules about the map. There is one of these, a terrain key, but it doesn't have those on it, of course. The one thing I have a question about at this point. Nope. And on turn 2, you go back to normal movement. Reinforcements come in on the depot, and they don't get disrupted. Except Allied units on map C may not use strategic movement in turn 12, or if it's an alternative scenario. Now, what's map C? Map C is the southern map. Okay. Montgomery's slow, is basically what it's saying, I think. And anybody who goes to help him. All right. We're going to have to bend the rule book again. I don't know why the other one laid flatter. Yeah, I got to stop. Oh, why? I read the other one and left it open overnight at points, and this one didn't. Stacking on the invasion beach, you're allowed to stack 4 units if they're all small units. Only 3 as normal if there's any large units in it. Combat in an invasion beach German attritional die rolls. Allied units perform combat normally without a change in invasion situation. I believe there's standard invasion rules here, which if you fail to take the hex, you're destroyed. So you had better succeed in taking any hexes you jump into. German units that are in entrenchment hexes, which are most of the ones along the beach, maybe all of the ones along the beach, well, not at Salerno itself, are in entrenchments. On game turn 1 and 2, they can only attack by firing an attritional die rolls at adjacent Allied stacks. Once per friendly combat phase, choose a hex occupied by the Allied units and roll a die. And I guess this is a cause to the ally. It might be a step loss. What's kind of interesting about this is there's sort of some assumption here that they're capable of doing this and only do this. That's me being really, really picky, but that's the kind of thing that the SPI rules would somehow state without using a lot of words. They would use one additional word or something, and everything would feel a little bit more clear. There's an art to that, though. Special post-invasion buildup. At the end of each game turn, starting with turn 2, both sides enter a special buildup phase. When building smaller component units up, again, the SPI would give you an introduction that explains what's going on in the rule and then give you cases. Here, I'm supposed to infer the introduction. When building smaller component units into regiment or brigade units, follow the guidelines for nationality and unit type. For the Allies, all regimental and brigade members shown as assault battalion are removed from the game. Replace these with full and half-strength regiments and brigades of the same regimental brigade code or number. Now, here's what's interesting. These guys are entered as assault units. It's not clear whether these guys are or not. They seem to indicate they're not. Maybe they enter as assault units in some of the other scenarios. Maybe in that variable, in the lost variable campaign scenario, which is not printed for some reason. Maybe it didn't work. Maybe it just didn't fit and they chose to throw it out. Allied units have to be within 5 hexes to qualify for buildup. The regimental brigade unit must be placed in any available controlled hex that is in supply, not adjacent to German unit. And every unit comprising the buildup force can trace up to the 5 hex limit. If there are 3 battalions on the map, even if these have taken... Now, it might be possible that you can't reach this, but you're able to do it at the end of each game turn, so you may wait until you get this buildup. If there are 3 battalions on the map, even if they've taken any step losses, you get a full-strength regimental brigade placed. That'll be a big unit that gets a combat chit and has a zone of control and all kind of stuff like that. If one battalion's been eliminated, all you get is a half-strength regiment or brigade. Half-strength being 1 step loss. The German 16th Panzer Division has a different makeup for its 2 regiments. Each regiment will need 1 infantry, one infantry battalion, 1 infantry company, 2 anti-tank or tank companies to build up to a full-strength regiment. Less than these 4 units will result in a half-strength regiment. Okay. Whatever. And that may be the German units that I didn't account for, but I'm not sure. You know, again, when this division has completed the... Okay, so is this part of 19.4.3, this 19.4.4? It seems specific. This seems like it covers the entirety of the German 16th Panzer. But now when this division has completed the buildup of its 2 regiments, all of the company-sized units making up the 16th, so this is part of this rule. All of the 16th Panzer will have been removed from play. The only units that start the game on map A that will not be removed are the artillery, engineer, and the following formations, and it gives me some other things. If the necessary unit combinations are within 10 hexes of each other, a full or half-strength regiment is placed within that 10 hex limit. That is still German control, not adjacent to Allied units. I don't even think this is a sentence. And outside the original fortification line perimeter. Okay, but this is map A. Is that this map? Yes, okay. If only one affiliated unit survives on either side, the cadre of the regiment is brought on the map instead of the unit. And you can still build that up under these rules now. Units comprising the force to be built up must be on the same map section or in the same transit track and may not be in an isolated status to qualify for building up purposes. Once built up, you can't break them back down. So you can get rid of the units, I guess. All right. I've had enough. I'm serious. It's going to take me forever to get through these rules, but I am really, again, it snowballs. Things start going bad. A rule book doesn't make sense to me when I read through it, and fighting through it the next time is just going to be fucking hard. And then actually playing the game is going to be hard. And maybe it'll win me over. It's happened every now and then. But usually those negatives that build up from a bad rule book kill me. Airborne operations, I believe, are largely the same as they are for Sicily. Which is to say, you put the units on the map to the hex they're going for. You actually have to roll a die in this one to determine prevailing wind. That's set in Sicily. And then you roll, let's see if we can find a chart. Airborne missions chart. You roll a die to see if you take a loss, which normally is going to be just a disruption. They can't move, but it could actually be a step loss as well. More likely to take damage as gliders because they're more vulnerable. And then you roll a scatter. T indicates they're on target. A indicates you'll be in a random adjacent hex. And an S is you move a die roll number of hexes in the prevailing wind direction for the turn. Weather. Like in Sicily, they unfortunately, and this is one of my gripes I have about Sicily, they unfortunately basically copy the same statement, which is set up as like a Mistral affects this, that, and the other. It doesn't give you links into where you're going to find it, and it doesn't give what the effects are. My memory is the effects are pretty minimal. So for example, on the Airborne, it's baked into the Airborne chart. It's not like there's any particular rules you have to remember on any of these. Air supply, is a modifier. I don't know how much it affects Amphibious. It might be a modifier to the disruption. Here we go. It is indeed. It's a modifier to the disruption chance, which again, doesn't mean much. That's just whether you get to move a hex, basically. Supply. Okay. Uses standard rules for supply on this, but the Germans use maps A and B, the northern edge, which I believe is up here, except that's A and B. Map C, Foggia. Foggia is a supply source. It's not on C. Foggia is somewhere. Oh, yeah, maybe it is. I don't know. That's Toronto. Is this Foggia? I'm having trouble reading this map. Yeah, I don't know where Foggia is. Great. I know that there's a counter that appears to start on Fogia, but I'm not sure I put it on the board because it's not in the setup instructions, and I don't know how it gets into the game. I thought it was a German counter. It might be on the board. Again, this map is much less readable than the old, that's not. I have the feeling it should be up here, but we were talking about A and B, so maybe it's on C. Yeah, I got no fucking clue where Fogia is. Aw. Sucks, huh? Okay, wait, here it is. Okay, so that's on map B, and you're pretty close to the north edge. All right, so far we have no supply on map C. I think you can supply through the transition things, though. The U.S. can only, or the Allies can only supply to the depots of their nationality. After turn 12, the UK 8th Army supply can be traced off the west board edge of map C. All right, that would be down here on this end. I guess something happens on the toe. But support for game functions is charged to the 8th Army Depot at Toronto, which I guess can't move there. However, if units of the 8th Army can only trace off map and not to Toronto, no action that would require the expenditure of support points may be taken. They can trace there, but support is charged to Toronto. But if you can't go to Toronto, you can't charge support to Toronto. Yeah, great. Whatever. And I guess that means you can't attack, which is different from the normal rules, which is that you would attack, but if you don't have enough support, you always charge support when you attack. And again, I don't know. Maybe you must still attack, and it's still charged to Toronto, and nothing changes. A little not completely well written. To cover the situations. Ranger and Commando units remain in supply and may continue to trace their own landing beaches as a supply source for these two units only. And we have these, I know there's one there, and there's a British one over here. Going around the side of Salerno. Okay. If the beach is captured, no more supply can be traced from the beach until recaptured, and one additional turn has been passed. Both may trace from either beach Vietre or Maiori, which I think are these beaches, I would assume, but they aren't labeled as such, of course. They're labeled, these guys are labeled with like Sugar Roger. These guys aren't labeled at all. Oh, red, green, but they don't have their names on it, so who knows. Yep. Or is Vietre and Maori? No, Vietre and Maori are these two. And wait, that may be different. Okay, they can trace to the other one's supply source. Okay. To trace supply sources across a transit track, one road linking both sides of the track must not be in an undisputed zone of control or an enemy unit. Now, these transit tracks aren't well explained as far as I know. I don't know if I can take this road and come out up here, or if I have to try to figure out what road that links to. I've got 18 to 18 here, I've got 19 here, but I don't see a 19 anywhere else, if these are indeed highway signs. So that's not really helpful. But in addition, it may be that I can go in through here and come out over there, and there's no problem. Because like I said, the transit tracks are not well explained. Everything that is new to this game is not well explained, pretty much. Enemy units solely occupying a transit track zone block all friendly supply lines from tracing through them. So I guess I can just charge all the way up it, assuming there's no hex with just enemy units. If both friendly and enemy are in there, you can trace through it. But maybe they mean if I'm blocking where those road hexes would connect. I don't know. But I'll take it that I can just trace all the way through it. Supply links. Units within supply range of a transit track that is not enemy controlled may trace through up to 2 tracks. Huh? What is a track? This looks like a transit track to me. Again, unsure. There is no map instructions about what these transit tracks are. We'll see if there's anything further in the rules about them. But this was one of my complaints as I read through, kept expecting to get some kind of enlightenment about the transit things. And I didn't even have the map in front of me, which has only added more questions. But it didn't make a lot of sense. Okay. You connect 2 adjacent maps here. Right. For a unit in level 4, 5, or 6 to be in supply, it has to be adjacent to the supply source. I think this is basic rules. Or a transit track or road hex. The road must be connected as per 11 to a friendly supply source. Okay, this looks all like standard. If you have pack transport, you may trace supply 1 hex further than you normally would. If you're in an entrenchment, you still have to trace supply normally. I think this is a chart which I thought was in the base rules. I thought we looked at it. All units are automatically in supply on the turn they enter. There's an extra US depot. I gotta fold my game again. Which, if landed by port assault, another special rule I don't quite understand, may become a supply source after undergoing any German port demolitions and normal port repair sequences. Okay. Depots. The Allied player has 4 depot counters, 2 for each of the UK and US. They can only trace to their own nation. The depots are initially deployed in second wave as indicated by their setup codes. There are no setup codes on the counter or anything like that. It's in the back of the rule book, I guess. I guess that's what they mean. I mean, I've seen it. The Allied player must land them according to the Amphibious rules. They can only be landed on a beach hex containing roads. Like I said, they seem to be on an arrow track. I don't know if I have the capability to, span other things. If I do, what does it mean when there's no arrow going? Again, the visual presentation here, I would say straight ahead, but maybe they mean something similar to the Sicily map, which had all kind of divisions of where things could land and everything, expressed in a very clear and functional method. They may not be landed in a port, swamp, or city. They may only land in a hex in an enemy zone of control if the hex is occupied by a friendly combat unit. They're never subject to disruption. Exception, see ports. The British depot is placed directly into Toronto on game turn 1B, and it's over there in the sequence. A depot is not a combat unit. We already know that, I think. A depot in a non-port can be moved to an Allied-owned port during the depot segment of the movement phase. Depots eliminated due to combat results come back after 2 turns to a beach. That'll lose you half your support points accumulated. And if you end up losing both depots for a given nationality, you lose all your support points. This is all Sicily rules. 1 eliminated depot of each nationality may be returned per game turn. Okay, there's a US-UK boundary in this game, which we have not gotten to yet. I've seen counters for it. Air and sea supply during the supply phase of a player turn. You can attempt to supply a unit by air per game turn. Only the allies can supply units by sea. This will improve the supply status by 1 level. Again, I thought we had this in the basic rules. If a unit to be supplied by air is in an enemy zone of control, you have to make a die roll 1 to 3, otherwise it's 1 to 5. If the German rolls a 6 on an air supply, he gets a +1 die roll modifier on any successive attempts, and that is cumulative. To be supplied by sea, you must be in a coastal hex, no more than 20 all sea or partial sea hexes from a friendly depot. That should be pretty easy, except maybe on those maps. Sea supply is automatic, but for either air or sea supply, you have to expend a support point. It'd be kind of nice if there was a procedure and it said that in the die roll, but you know. Air supply may only be attempted in good weather. Sea supply may be made in any weather except storm. No Allied unit can receive both air and sea supply to bring it from isolated to just happy go happy. And we are going to pause again because there's only so much of this I can take. What's annoying me about these specific rules is these are all repeats of the rules that are in here. They've got this, hey, you know, let's not repeat a rule type thing. Maybe they stole it from the Sicily design where there was a serious limitation on the space as a magazine game that had exceeded its size. But, you know, these support point rules, they're all spelled out right from there. The same thing with the supply rules. They're all spelled out. There might be some specifics you need to fold into the base rules, but it was as if there was no discipline in writing these rules and no real overall plan. And it's just part of the irritation. I'm reading the same things again, and I'm saying, didn't I just read this? And not this time, but I mean, when I was first reading this, and then the things that are specific to the game aren't clearly stated well enough, you know. But yeah, we've got support points. We've got this talked about before. The only key thing here is this gaining of support points part and ports, but that's a different rule actually. Each depot generates support points each turn, and this is 1 for beach, 2 in a minor port, 3 in a major port. Okay, I'm not sure what the visibility of the difference between minor and major port is. It's not, again, the map's not as clear and doesn't jump out the way the SPI ones did, so I have to kind of look. And once again, the terrain chart does not tell me the information that I want. Well, I've got this. This is probably a minor port. Maybe Salerno's a major. They look the same. Gosh. Taranto is definitely a major, so I'm going to say the white makes it a major port and the blue makes it minor. Again, that would be nice to have in the terrain effects chart or somewhere. The Germans get theirs, like in Sicily, based off of the airfield chart. The more airfields they lose, the less support points they're going to get over the course of the game. And of course, you need these to fight with, which was explained in the basic rules and is explained again here. And so I did it again. Here we go. Major and minor are distinguished in the rules. Too bad they didn't do it in the terrain chart. Too bad they're mentioned before the major and major and minor ports are mentioned before they're actually tell you what they look like. But okay. So the German makes a roll when you capture a port to see if there is a demolitions effect there, and there may be a table for that because it's not clear here. There it is. I bet you it's repeated on the tables chart too, because they seem to be fairly good at that. Yeah, so here we have this. And what you do is you make a roll and you get a delay marker, and they actually, and this is nice, they actually give delay markers in here, if I recall correctly. They have these port demolition +1, +2, and that's how many turns that the port is out of commission. Oh, what about this repair die roll? What the fuck's that about? Oh, I think that's a penalty to the repair die roll. So it's not 1 or 2 turns like it was in Sicily. It's so far demolished, and you're going to have to see if you repair it. Okay. Port assault. This is a special rule that I have no idea what it is. This is an exception to the rule governing the movement of depots, which may be performed only once during the game. Okay. If during any bookkeeping phase it's determined that a port of any size has been captured by the Allied player and held in supply for 2 full game turns, it may now be declared as a port assault, and the spare U.S. depot moved directly in. Expend 2 support points from the Army performing the assault immediately. Doesn't sound like an assault to me, but okay. This action also costs 2 Allied victory points for diverted shipping. The port's now a supply source and entry point for U.S. resources. I don't know why it's called a port assault. There's a way to buy yourself an extra depot. Okay. Airfields and CVs. These rules get kind of weird too. So we've got ships in the game, right? Some of those ships are carriers. There were some questions online about this. Again, there's no errata, no official errata, nothing like that. All there is threads with questions in them, which is not sufficient support in my book. Somebody should be compiling an errata for the game. An airfield is considered captured by the Allies if an Allied unit occupies or was the last to move through the airfield hex and there are no supplied German units adjacent to it. You count the amount of airfields you've captured. Due to long distance to friendly air bases, carrier units are provided that maintain existing Allied air power with ample land-based airfields until ample land-based airfields are captured. Carrier presence is necessary to maintain air power on maps A and B. Okay, once again, we got a log. That's as we get into the, away from Sicily, basically, where we have airfields. Loss of these units while the airfield marker is at 5 or less means no Allied air power is possible on map B, and there's a minus die roll on map A attempts. Okay. Once the marker reaches 6, carriers are no longer necessary and should be removed from play. During bookkeeping, you consult the airfield chart and cross-reference the number of airfields captured to get how many air points you have and what your chance of a successful attack or defense is. A successful intervention. And you roll the die when you allocate the point and see whether or not the air point works. Air points are shared by the Allied nationalities on rain turn. You have the air points on storms. There are none. If the Allies control less than 4 airfields, they can declare emergency bombing. These are 2 additional air points available. And these give column shifts, but they cost 2 support points per use. I don't know if that's per emergency bombing declaration or per air point. These points and cost 2 per. I think it's per air point that you use. The off-map airfield at Crotone on map C is captured automatically on the bookkeeping phase of turn 4. I think that's over here. All right. We got a fold. The transit tracks. Okay. When moving between maps, units must use the transit tracks. Tracks sounds like you follow the whole thing, right? I don't think that's the case. That separate these maps before entering a different map. These tracks represent 20 to 40 miles of terrain and may be occupied by both enemy and friendly units. Now, 20 to 40 sounds like that is actually the right number of hexes, probably. There are bold dividers within the tracks that may not be crossed without spending a complete turn rating inside the track. Yeah. Units entering transit tracks pay cost per terrain type exited, lose excess movement factors, and may not move further in the current game turn. Units entering are placed on the waiting side of the track. Well, there's 2 waiting spaces. I don't know. We shall see. We shall see. Maybe this will make more sense. All units that enter the transit track are required to spend 1 full friendly movement phase on the waiting side. Not in the first waiting hex or anything like that. Before moving out of the track unless combat results require it to exit. Units beginning the friendly movement phase on the waiting side of the transit track use their entire movement allowance and are moved to the ready side of the track. My feeling here is that there's 2 boxes in here, but there's all these hexes, and they're all divided, and I don't know what's going on. This is not what I expected to see when I read the rules. When I looked at this and saw the hexes, I thought that maybe, but that there was sort of a connection between the two, but I don't think that's the case either. I don't think the number of hexes has anything to do with this, but I think it's graphically presented in a really poor fashion, which is not surprising, to tell you the truth. German units entering the game from the north map edge as reinforcements may enter transit track number 1 on the first hex of entry. The north map edge may enter transit track 1. I'm guessing that's this one. It's kind of hard to see. I got number 1, number 6, number 5, number 4. What the fuck? So yeah, I've got number 6 waiting, number 5 waiting, number 4 waiting, number 1, number 2, number 3. I think what it is this is one track, this is one track, this is one track, and basically you're using these, all the way on one side or all the way on the other. All right. No building or demolition are allowed inside the transit track. Units within transit tracks are not considered when calculating proximity of demolition. All right. And then we have special movement rules on the board. Undisrupted Allied units may only move a single hex beyond the beach on the first turn. Of their landing. Units of the 8th Army on Map C, Allied units entering Map C as reinforcements, may not use the strategic map on Map C, strategic movement on Map C, until game turn 11. But there's special rules on this at 2825, whatever. Only the German 1529 Panzer Grenadier, blah, 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 are free to move on turn 1 due to fuel shortages. The rest of the 29th Panzer Grenadier is free to move on turn 2. I hope that's all the units in the game at the beginning. Salerno beach defenses. Units occupying trenches on the Salerno beach may not move on turn 1 except through combat. If they don't have entrenchment markers, they're under no restrictions. German entrenchments that begin the game have temporary zone of control even though the units occupying them are battalion or company size. Once these hexes are vacated for any region, that zone of control is lost. And they also only attack in this special way. Allied units may not attempt to leave Map A in an eastern direction, okay, which is Map A again. I think this is Map A. In an eastern direction, going across there until turn 4. Paratroop units that are airdropped may move only tactically until legal supply line exists to a friendly depot. Map C depot will not function for this purpose until after game turn 11 unless you're using optional rules. Commando and Ranger may always ignore the first enemy zone of control they enter during retreat or advance after combat. That's going to be hard to remember. Pack transport. This is a Sicily rule. Is this, I remember reading about it before, is it in the base rules? We may have already gone over this. Who knows? Starting on turn 8, after tame turn 8, the Allied player may equip units with pack transport. Up to 3 units can be equipped with pack transport. 1 support point is expended to equip a unit with pack transport. Unit must be in supply. Allows you to trace supply a hex longer. They may not use strategic movement, but they use reduced parenthesized costs on the terrain effects chart as if they're mountain units, which I don't think there are in this game. If the marker is removed for any unit, it's lost, and pack transport markers cannot be transferred between units. Roads, bridges, rivers, and towns. A unit using tactical movement must pay an additional movement point when entering a road with a friendly combat unit. Same as Sicily. Additional units in the hex do not increase the cost. This must be paid even if you're not moving along the road. Pure armor or artillery may not cross unbridged rivers except if accompanied by an engineer unit. The engineers are specifically put into this game rather than being an assumed asset, which could cause you problems every now and then. This special ability is lost on rain or storm. The engineer and armor or artillery unit must start the movement phase stacked together and adjacent to the river in order to do it. It costs both their entire movement allowance to cross, and we got a break because I got to turn a page. Infantry can cross unbridged rivers at the beginning of a movement phase adjacent to the river and expending all their movement. They may not be performed on rain or storm. They apparently have engineers built in for this, the bridging units. A mechanized unit using tactical movement pays an additional movement point for entering a town, not city. Now, it's interesting because mechanized is being used. Mechanized infantry is a unit type. Mechanized is sort of like a movement class. But they don't really spell that all out the way they would in, say, an OCS rulebook. By the way, see what I mean about these staples? I have not seen a game undergo that kind of rust in a long time. Now, maybe it's the move from Phoenix to here, and I'm going to look at some of my my older GMT games and see if they're rusting staples as well. That's going to be a problem for me. Sea movement. I got to swap batteries. All right. Maybe this is a time to break. Just looked at a GMT game that I've had for a long time, longer than this, and the staples are fine. I'm just assuming they're using a low quality of staple here that's not treated, which is strange. Probably a lack of thinking about the issue at all, because they definitely spend a lot on the paper component. But that's an interesting thing to think about your MMP games, that they're saving a little bit on the staples. and that's fine, except that you don't want your staples rusting. This is going to be a problem. These are going to rust and fall apart, and I'm going to have to replace them. All right. Allied warships may use only the full, not partial, ocean hexes to apply pressure to German defenders in several ways. Now, this is something I just don't understand. I've read through it, and I'm hoping again. Warships occupying full light blue outlined sea hexes. That's these. Adjacent to the coast, employ their fullest range when firing in combat. These hexes are subject to German artillery fire and minefield. A mine clearing die roll must be made before you can enter one of those sea hexes. You roll a die on a 1 through 3, you clear a path to the hex. After turn 4, the coast is considered free of mines and you don't have to roll anymore. You can make one attempt at sea movement or NGS, naval gunfire support, per turn. If ships are moved between maps, they cannot be used for combat. If ships committed to support a combat fail the minefield die roll and now cannot fire due to range limitations, the combat will not receive NGS support this turn. So this is kind of interesting because that's implying that you can both move and fire, but something else seemed to indicate that you can't do both. I don't know. They get flipped to their fired side. Warships must be within range to participate in combat. Leaving the coastal hexes is automatic. Just place the ship in the staging area behind the beachhead at the end of the game turn. There is no staging area. I guess they mean in the water, kind of how I have them. And I guess when they're saying movement, they're not talking about hexes here. They're only talking about between sea zones or something. Again, the map and the expectations and the rules, they just don't link up. These should not have hexes on them or something. Movement between maps A and C is allowed by spending 2 full turns off the map. Okay? And that's indicated by these charts. What was the other C movement? Ships are moved between maps. Okay. Movement to the east coast of map B is only possible from the south of C and another 2 turns of delay. Again, there's room for these. Not spelled out how to use it, but If you don't spell it out, I can figure it out. If you spell it out and it's confusing like this shit was, yeah, I'm not sure I can. Ships in map C operate normally in any sea zone in that map. Any sea zone on that map. I only see one sea zone on that map, right? I mean, what the fuck are they talking about? Ships on map C operate normally on any sea. Oh, I've got 3 different zones. And I guess I can, I guess by operate normally, it means I can just sail around. I'm not moving from zone to zone or anything like that. I don't know. One combat unit may accompany each ship unit from a friendly in-port depot to another port depot if the unit begins the game turn stacked with the depot. But ships don't go from depots, so I guess the ships can magically transport. They have transports to the units that take them from one depot to another. Fucked if I know. No sea movement from map C to map A is allowed until turn 8. But I guess you can move from A to C. Reserve movement. Stacks marked with a reserve marker. Look, it's the basic reserve movement rules here, right? I don't know. Reconnaissance units, though, add to the die roll of 1d6 to its movement allowance. Okay. So recon units have a better reserve movement, and they're not really strong at combat, so you can fling them forward. To qualify for reserve movement, the stack may not be. This is all the standard rules here, except maybe. No sea movement in reserve. Units already in the ready side of a non-enemy occupied transit stack of the regular movement phase may be placed in reserve mode. There's no combat phase after reserve. It really looks to me like they're talking about the standard reserve rules have all been rewritten with maybe a little bit inserted about the recon units, because I don't remember that, but I'm not sure. All right, we are indeed taking our pause here. And again, in special combat, units in Salerno are never forced to attack adjacent enemy units. Well, that's part of the basic rules of the game again. Don't need to state that, but whatever. Unless attacking units, now this is in italics for some reason, occupy town, city, entrenchment, or level 4 or higher, which is also higher than the defenders, all enemy units adjacent to any attacking units must be attacked in some way. All right, so there's certain hexes from which you can attack. You can choose to attack only a limited number of enemy units. Otherwise, if you come out on the attack, you got to hit everything around you. British and U.S. may not normally stack together or attack together except within a transit track. If forced to stack due to combat results, they must separate their first opportunity. When attacked, they may defend together, but only one nationality may add military, air, and naval defensive support. The exception is the Derby Ranger unit that may fight either with British or U.S. units freely. Does that mean that it's an exception to the artillery, air, and naval? I doubt it. Units in city and towns are subject to the attack provisions of 10. To the voluntary attack provisions of 10. But CC below, even if in a city, town, or entrenchment, an attacking unit adjacent to enemy units in higher terrain must include those units in an attack of some kind. I mean, this is a messy thing, but okay. Unit in 4, 5, or 6 is not forced to attack an enemy in a hex at a terrain lower than its hex. If it does, it need to attack only one such hex. Well, you're never forced to attack, so this is worded poorly as well. This was not well developed. If a player's units occupy a higher level of terrain than enemy units, you get a column shift equal to the level difference in the hexes. I think that's part of the basic rules. It's certainly from Sicily. I accidentally came up here while my tea was running. I don't, it's hard for me to cope with. Anyway. And now we have a column shift for towns. That I know was special. Defending against amphibious landing has your strength doubled. If attacked solely from a sea hex. I don't know if that's possible anywhere, because all the beaches are not defended. Maybe there's some scenario where it is. And a unit defense normally across a river also has its strength doubled as per the standard rules. We had to talk about that again for no apparent reason. Transit track combat. Well, this obviously does need rules. Units starting inside or entering transit track zones that are enemy occupied. Well, we don't know what a zone is, right? That has not been defined. I think it's the in waiting and ready boxes, but maybe it's the whole zone. Maybe it's each hex. Not covered well. Start a possible encounter sequence of die rolls that may cause forces to evade each other. And we get a die roll. Both players roll a single die at the end of the movement phase. If either player rolls a 6, they automatically engage. In order for combat to take place, unless a 6 is rolled, both results must be engage. If either player rolls engage and there is no 6 rolled, no combat takes place. I think they mean if only one, not either, because either includes both. And combat units remain in the transit track until the next movement phase. Combat is standard combat, except that artillery must be within the zone to apply combat order shifts. When a retreat is called for, the owner has the option to retreat to an adjacent transit track. Okay, again, transit track, I think, is these whole things. So maybe it's if units are in them at all, and some units can be in the ready, some can be in the in waiting, and they can all gather together. I don't know. Retreat to an adjacent map. Retreat the full requirement. Take step losses that fulfill the result and remain in place. Yeah, I don't know. The special thing in the game is not well described at all. The one thing that the designer really had to think about and that they really had to kind of nail down new rules for, because honestly, they're largely just translating the old SPI rules here and adding a few tweaks. In direction of retreat, the map or transit of origin must be chosen. Now, there's no way to indicate that with the game components, so you just have to hope you remember. If the retreating units have more than one point of origin, one option of the owner's choice must be taken within the above limits. All advances after combat are ignored. B results: force the defender to exit the transit track and take a step loss. In order to remain in the transit track, the attacker, in this case, must take 2 step losses, otherwise they retreat back. Yeah. That's just the standard rules being clarified, which is fine. Terrain for combat purpose in transit racks is considered to be on the 2 to 3 line. It'll be in the middle. Defender takes some decent. Multi-unit combat is subject to the same restrictions as combat on the hex map. Units defending are totaled and defend as a single group. Attacking units are totaled and attack as a single group. What does this mean? I don't know. Let's keep looking. Shifts for divisional integrity, combined arms, etc. apply normally if the conditions allow. No air points, NGS, or elevation shifts applied. More than one regiment may participate in transit combat. This is due to a larger area, and it's an exception. So you can have, things that could not possibly happen on the hex map, and I'm fine with that. It's an abstraction. Units retreating during combat or entering into a transit track during the friendly reserve phase do not roll to evade, engage in combat, or impair the movement of enemy units inside the track in any way. What's that supposed to mean? Do I remember that they retreated during combat or entered during reserve and they will never affect them? I don't think so. But what effect can they have? When is this special, they don't impair the movement of enemy units? I'm fine with the combat part, but when does the fact that they don't impair the effect of enemy units take place? I can only imagine that it happens during retreats. In combats that are happening. And Allied units of different nationalities may occupy the same transit track and defend together normally if attacked. Unlike normal combat restrictions, Allied units may attack together, but they do so with a negative column shift during resolution and a cost of support point for each. Units within a transit track may only engage in combat with units that are also within the same track. Zones of control don't extend. All right. How are we getting here? I'm trying to see because I got to go shopping today. And we're going to overrun, but too bad. Artillery, anti-ship rockets, inter-army restrictions. Throughout the game, the Allied player has to maintain a boundary between the British 8th Army and the multinational 5th. This is the 5th, this is the 8th. The line is marked each game turn by an 8th Army boundary arrow markers, which I don't think I have. I could pull the ones out of Sicily. Maybe they're these. I bet you they're those. Okay. And this works essentially the same as in Sicily. You can trace a boundary with those markers, and if you, and the 8th Army is allowed to enter the marker spaces, the 5th Army is not. Now, I remembered something about being able to ship units down here and maybe the British being able to trace supply to this, but I don't know. Okay, artillery must be in full supply to provide support. I think that's basic rule. Until turn 5, German artillery may also attack warships in full sea hexes closest to land. I think that means the outlined ones. At the end of the Allied turn, the Germans can fire artillery at warships. Roll a d6 for each German artillery that is not fired in the current turn that is within 3 hexes of an Allied warship. On a 1, you remove the ship and eliminate any combat unit using that ship for transport from play. Now, I assumed the transport happened during movement. Is this kind of a retroactive you can hit it? Or do you carry units around if you're going further or what? Not well specified as with everything else in this game. I guess you could sail around with them and move them next to the water. I don't know if you get a shot when it's coming into port if you have artillery in place near the port. I just don't know. On game turn 5 and thereafter, on all AM turns, the German secret weapon, anti-ship radio-controlled rockets, replace the artillery die rolls. There's a range limit on these weapons. I believe they mean there's no range limit, because any one Allied ship on either map A or map B may be targeted, even within an open sea staging area. The German rolls a die. On a 1, it hits the ship and removes it. 2 through 6, no effect. The Allies can buy replacement ships if they wish. This was answered in the questions. There's a cost of 2 support points and 3 victory points when a warship is lost. And 8th and 5th Army must immediately share the cost. And then it will cost 2 support points and 3 victory points again when the replacement arrives. So you lose the points for losing the ship, no matter what the ship is. And then you lose them again if you want that ship back. And this is especially important with carriers. Naval gunfire support. Allied warships can bombard the German defenders by shifting odds columns on the combat table. Warship, I didn't really mention what the carriers do. If you lose a carrier, you don't lose air points. You get a shift against, you get a minus, you get a penalty to your attempt to succeed in airstrikes during those turns. And okay. So warships are able to attack or defend together with attacking with ground troops. Allied battleships or monitors add 2 shifts in combined attacks or defense. Now, do we have a range here? They produce combat shifts automatically in normal, not extended range. Allied cruisers add 1 shift to combined attacks and 1 in defense. The ship type is listed here, which map it's on and how many hexes of range I guess it has is there. We don't define a normal versus extended range yet. Maybe it's somewhere else. Yeah. Okay. Only 1 attempt at either sea movement or NGS per turn is allowed. Again, if you attempt sea movement, that's indicating you're moving into one of these things. Seems that's the only time you attempt sea movement is moving into the mine clearing, and elsewhere it seemed to indicate you could do both, so I don't know. BB and M class may extend the effective range by up to 3 hexes, 2 on map C, by rolling a die. Okay, here's how it happens. And CL can extend by up to 2 hexes. Just before combat, the allied player makes a declaration of combat, may or may. Now, that extended range is just the roll to see whether or not you can engage in the combat at that range. It's weird because else, again, the wording just doesn't match together, but that's what I would assume from what they've said. Just before combat, the allied player makes a declaration of combat, earmarks the ships, can deploy these on light blue outlined hexes as close to land combat as possible. Remember, that requires a roll, and if you do that, maybe that's movement, that's the only movement you attempt, and now you can't fire? I don't know. Doesn't seem like it by their procedure. Roll a die to attempt to enter full C light blue outline or light blue outline coastal hexes. What? I think they mean full C and. I mean, that's not being used as an or because that fits with everything else. If successful, the ship can enter and automatically support in-range combat units ashore. If unsuccessful, it remains in dark blue from which the attempt was made. If the target's still in range, you can still attempt to support. Stacking is unlimited for warships. The carriers are there. If loss of either of these means a reduction of air points by 1, okay, so this is different. If the allied player is in control of 4 airfields or less, 1 CV is necessary to provide air support on map B until the airfield marker reaches 6. Now, elsewhere it had said die rolls, but okay. We'll just ignore that. We'll pretend that this is this rule. At some point during the game, I may find things are different. Some battalions have 2 steps in strength. This is standard rules here. Again, being repeated. No unit may ever retreat or advance into terrain or impassable to it. That had better be standard rules. If it's forced into prohibited terrain or into a C hex, it will be eliminated. But remember, you don't have to retreat even on a breakthrough in those cases because you can't. You can take losses instead. In addition to the retreat priorities, units of the retreating must first choose a hex that will be closer to the direction of their supply source and continue in that direction. Okay. An optional rule. Units should surrender all full-strength chits once every 4th turn in the Allied bookkeeping phase. This is like Sicily. Sicily basically makes the chits go away. This game says, your chits go away every 4 turns. Now, given that the sequence turns on this appear to be 2 turns a day, this is a tighter game than Grenade or Patton's Third Army are. I am going to just leave the chits in play on this one. Sicily has 2 days per turn. This has 2 turns per day. The others have 1 turn per day. I think leaving the chits just works better. It's easier, and I like the idea that units don't, change their composition that quickly. Reinforcements. Allied seaborne reinforcements come in at the depot. They can't come into an enemy zone of control unless there's a friendly unit there. Pays terrain and moves tactically. Nothing too exciting. You can come in as reserves. You can delay them. Some are variable. If you take it variable, you're going to have to pay some support points, and there's also a victory point cost to taking them. There's no track for the victory points, I don't think. Maybe there is. I don't remember. I don't think victory points are tracked. If they are, they're tracked here on this ×1 and everything. I'll have to look at those markers. There may be victory point markers in play. If there's not, I have to write them down like I had it to in Sicily. Allied and German reinforcements can enter into a friendly map edge in a designated road. These units are coded with their map road designation. Units arriving from off-map pay normal. If it's more than 3 units, this is all standard rules being repeated here. Let's skip them. The UK 1 Canadian and 5 British reinforcements may enter the game on the game turn after there are no supplied German units on map C. Okay, are these something that I don't have in my reinforcements, or are they something that's in there? I don't fucking know at this point, and I can't go look it up. But I am pissed as hell. This should be in the reinforcements rolls, not fucking buried here, but whatever. After there are no supplied German units on map C or the listed turn of arrival, whichever occurs first, check for the conditional release during the Allied movement phase. Early arrival ends the prohibition of Allied strategic movement on map C. Okay, I gotta find these fuckers. 5 British reinforcements and the UK 1 Canadian. The stack that's listed here on turn 11, and in the reinforcements chart, it is not noted as anything special. Boy, that's fucking annoying. There should be a C28.25. In fact, I'm going to go write that into my rulebook. Because the nice thing is, this kind of paper I can write on very well. It's real paper. Go to variable reinforcements. If the German player can do well, they can get more reinforcements. If the Allies push the Germans back quickly enough, they might get less. Or they might get more support. During bookkeeping, on every 4th turn, the player's total of victory points accumulated on the track, add the current number of airfields, add or subtract the die roll modifier for the capture of Battipaglia and Alta Via on the variable reinforcements chart. Well, we should have a chart then. Not here. Okay, well, that's nice. The non-existent chart, except maybe it's here. I don't know. We'll see. Yes, this is wonderful, isn't it? There it is. Roll 2 dice. Both players roll. The result gives an Allied German listing of available conditions or units available. No more than 3 units per turn may be added, and not before game turn 5. All available variable units are optional, and the players may never force to bring them into play. You're going to pay victory points. Added single-use air points, anti-shipping missiles, or support points are free, however. All right, you get replacement points shown on the game turn record phase. Now, unlike in Sicily, here they come in, I guess, no more than 1 at a time because you can't save them. You spend them on your friendly reinforcement phase. You can spend 1 point per nationality per game turn. Well, that had better be baked into the track or else something's a little wacky. I don't know, maybe you have the option of what kind you want. You receive armor and infantry points. If you spend an armor, you can flip a mechanized movement type unit. And you can do this to improve a cadre up to a reduced strength unit, or one of the larger units, or a battalion. Flip that up. And you can even return a parent unit as a cadre onto the board, but only if some of its division is still on the board. And infantry works similarly with the limitations. You cannot bring eliminated smaller units back on the board, and you spend a replacement point, a support point, and you may lose victory. You will lose victory points for taking replacements. If you have no engineers on the map, you can return one from the eliminated units at the cost of 1 infantry replacement. Replacements begin 5 days into the campaign, and 1 infantry or armored is allowed for each nationality per day. So actually, they're not written on the chart, on the turn record chart. We have to try to remember that you get those starting on turn 10, 5 days. Right, and now they've got a chart here, which looks different. Here Here it says one is allowed for each nationality per day. Here, it's different. It's kind of every other turn, and sometimes it's armor, sometimes it's infantry, whatever. I guess this chart is meant to govern it, not the way the rule is written. Mandatory attacks. If the allied player has not made an attack by the end of game turn 2, how's that going to happen? 1 victory point is immediately deducted from the allied VP track. If the German has not attacked allied seaborne forces by the end of game turn 6, a victory point is awarded on the allied track. When do the missiles come in? I don't fucking remember. You get victory points. You keep track of them turn by turn. Added to the total, so what do you get? It's the support point, victory point chart on page 24. And then you look to a victory schedule, and the Allies have to get over 52 to get their win. If they're under 38, they lose. And then we get to the scenario rules. There's no alternate scenario. So let's look at the victory point track, page 24. There are 49 total victory points. Let's see. Do you get them every turn? In which case it should be easy, or do you just get a total? Players should keep track of victory points turn by turn on the track to bring this total to the end of the game, where it is added or subtracted according to the support victory point cost. Well, 49 is obviously not enough for the Allies to win the game. So let's keep looking. There are points for killing things as well baked into this. What's nice about this compared to the Sicily, I know I've been harshing on this game pretty bad, is that this allows me to get a visual feel for what needs to be done to win the game. One of the things that really bothered me about Sicily is I just had a whole list written, without a chart. A chart makes it a little easier for me to get an idea. But I look at this, and I can only win 49 victory points from terrain. That's scary. However, I believe if this is like the others, somewhere in here, airfields. When I take an airfield, that's worth a point. There's probably a bunch of them. I wish I had a total number. Sicily gave me a total number of those. I don't see that listed here. That would be helpful to know. And stuff like that. Exiting units off the map. There's no rules for exiting units off the map that I've seen. They give me points. Too bad they didn't give me rules for that, huh? Are those rules then maybe in some of the scenario notes? Maybe. The race for casino, I think, allows you to exit units off the map. I hope. Victory conditions, longsword. I don't see any special rules, though. So I kind of thinking that maybe this one does. Yeah, here we go. +5 per regiment, plus the number of battalions. So this scenario includes that exiting. The exiting is listed on the track that seems to indicate everybody, but, I can't do it in the campaign game, whatever. Yeah. Let me just say this. So far, I have not run into any gamers games, any multi-man publishing games other than the ones under the gamers. And I have not looked at their ASL stuff. I assume they did a good job on that, or else the ASL community would hate them completely. I have not seen one that's of any complexity that kind of holds up. I thought taking a series game and adding something to it, especially when I started looking at it and seeing this is basically Sicily, I thought they would do a reasonable job of that. It seems like they just do not have the capacity to develop their own games. You're okay with something simple like Warriors of God. You're fine getting away with that. But you start going to their other things, and I haven't looked at many, but I have been repeatedly disappointed. This was another shot at that Tide at Sunrise, I know, was one that I gave a shot at. That's sitting right there. That was a mess. I think there's been a couple others that I've looked at that are not as clear on my head. But man, they just do not have their act together in their own in-house stuff. And this is another representation. Now, maybe things have changed. I don't think I have anything from them that's really new. This came out a long time ago, I think, and I bought it on a sale option. Another thing is I got a response from the designer of one of the later games in this series, and he said he kind of cleaned up the rules for that later game, and it didn't have all the complex, it's like Panzers in the Mist or something like that. I don't know what it is. So maybe the series has improved over time, but as it stands on this, man, and this is not yet a published game, I think. This one looks like such a mess. And, maybe it's going to be fun, but I combine the fact that the map is tough to read with the difficulty in coping that I'm having in coping with these rules. I don't have a lot of hope that this is going to be a lot of fun. I think, Sicily was a hard burden with its terrain levels and everything like that, but at least the visuals on the map work better. Visuals on this, I can say one big good thing about them. They didn't make the mistake, although these are glossy counters, which I usually don't like. They didn't make the mistake that was made in Sicily, where the counters were basically unreadable. And there's some kind of nice things, like for the divisional integrity, the units have this nice little color coding on them. That's going to help keep units together a lot better. Of course, early in the game, before you consolidate your units, that won't be as easy, but they kind of land in the same place. So that shouldn't be too painful. And whatever pain there is, it's just in the first couple turns when you're setting up for that, to build up your units to the full size. All right, let's send this sucker up. It took way longer than I had hoped. I had these thoughts of let's do both the rules, together, since we did Sicily already, and this is largely Sicily, but yeah, this was just beyond painful.